Welcome to the presentation of Securities fraud here at the City North Hotel. Our first speaker is going to be Hester Bais. Hester is an attorney and whistleblower. She's from Holland, and she wrote a book called The Worst Bank Scenario. Is that right? Hester, I'll play this little video first, will I? And then I'll give you the mic. So hopefully.
Weet je het nog? De kredietcrisis van 2008. Mensen verloren hun baan, konden hun schulden niet meer betalen en bleven zitten met onverkoopbare huizen of een enorme restschuld. Het is een kwestie van tijd totdat een nieuwe crisis het leven van gewone mensen opnieuw op zijn kop zet.
Ik ben Hester. Na mijn studie rechten en economie startte ik in de jaren 90 mijn carrière als jurist bij de ING-bank. Daarna werkte ik bij de toezichthouder AFM en bij de beurs. Nu ben ik advocaat financieel recht. Ik verricht al ruim 10 jaar onderzoek naar de gang van zaken bij banken en naar het toezicht in de financiële wereld. De feiten die tijdens mijn onderzoek aan het licht zijn gekomen, zijn onthutsend.
Het verdienmodel van banken leidde tot de kredietcrisis van 2008. De oorzaken hiervan zijn nooit aangepakt. Integendeel, met hulp van politici, toezichthouders en de Europese Centrale Bank hebben de banken via fraude en netwerkcorruptie hun bankenmodel in stand weten te houden. Banken verdienen maximaal door geld zo goedkoop mogelijk aan te trekken en door het zo duur mogelijk uit te lenen. Dat systeem is alleen mogelijk als banken ingewikkelde financiële producten afsluiten en elkaar onderpand verstrekken. Dit onderpand is niet voldoende beschikbaar op de financiële markten. Het onderpandtekort in Nederland bedroeg ten tijde van de kredietcrisis 200 miljard euro en in Europa het veelvoudige. De financiële wereld verbloedde dat tekort onder meer met behulp van de Europese Centrale Bank door het benodigde onderpand te faken.
Het systeem kan werken zolang financiële instellingen elkaar onderling vertrouwen. Maar er zakt als een kaartenhuis in elkaar als bijvoorbeeld consumenten of bedrijven niet meer in staat zijn om de aflossingen of leningen te betalen.
De economie dreigt opnieuw te bezwijken onder het verdienmodel van banken. De tijd tikt af naar het volgende grote financiële inferno en de gevolgen zullen nog verwoestender zijn, want het onderpandtekort is alleen maar groter geworden en het model risicovoller.
Ik zie het als mijn plicht mijn ontdekkingen over het bankensysteem aan het licht te brengen. Zo doe ik al sinds 2014 aangifte bij onder meer de AFM, de Nederlandse Bank, de Field en de Algemene Rekenkamer. Vanaf 2018 ben ik bovendien klokkenluider bij de Amerikaanse toezichthouder SEC.
De ontdekte feiten zijn gepubliceerd in het boek Worst Bank Scenario. In Worst Bank Scenario wordt aangetoond dat de Europese Centrale Bank de rente heeft verlaagd om grip te krijgen op de onderpandtekorten van banken. Dat het onderpandtekort van 200 miljard nooit echt is opgelost. Dat de pensioenfondsen banken hebben geholpen dit onderpandtekort van banken te verhullen. Dat de Nederlandse banken de kosten van het verhullen van de onderpandtekorten hebben afgewenteld op ondernemers en semi-publieke instellingen. Dat het leraren-, zorg- en woningentekort deels veroorzaakt is door dit verdienmodel. Dat buiten het parlement om wetswijzigingen zijn doorgevoerd om de onderpandtekorten blijvend te verbloemen. Dat in de jaarverslagen van grote banken enorme balanscorrecties zijn verricht, terwijl de toezichthouders de andere kant op keken. Dat onze kinderen straks alsnog de rekening moeten betalen van de honderden miljarden euro's die nu worden uitgegeven in Europa aan maatschappelijke projecten.
Fraude en corruptie blijven een schaduw werpen over de financiële wereld en dat moet stoppen. We pleiten daarom voor een structurele hervorming van de financiële sector. We moeten ons verenigen en niet meer toestaan dat we opnieuw slachtoffer worden van deze ongebreidelde geldmachine. We hebben jullie hulp nodig. Hoe meer publiciteit deze misstanden krijgen, hoe groter de kans dat we de financiële wereld op een eerlijke, veilige en transparante manier kunnen vormgeven.
I was just going to translate all of that, but apparently she tells me she can speak English. So there's a bit of luck. I don't have to show off with my fluent Dutch. Thanks, Hester.
Good morning. I wrote it down because my English is not that good. I'm very pleased with the large number of visitors today. That gives me hope, because daring to face the rot in the financial system creates a collective willingness to turn away from the system and build a fairer, safer and more sustainable system. You have just seen our campaign video, which has recently been subtitled in English and which will hopefully be shared en masse. We need citizens' help to spread this important story. Important because the credit crisis was not the end, but the starting signal for a new monetary system, including the so-called Transmission Protection Instrument, TPI, launched by the ECB in 2022. This new monetary system must be financed with a newly created, with this time European, sky-high debt mountain, and leads to the loss of sovereignty, the devaluation of money, and disappearance of cash, as well as the enforcement of a joint, unhealthy European budget. But before this system could function, a problem had to be solved first, namely the enormous shortage of collateral. As I explained in the video, this shortage amounted to 200 billion in the Netherlands in 2008 and a few thousand billions in Europe. ING is the largest commercial bank in the Netherlands, with a shortfall of 180 billion in 2014, and ING is also by far the largest party in the Great Dutch Bank fraud. During my work as a lawyer over the past 12 years, I have come across a massive collateral fraud, covering up the shortages internationally, and it all started with the so-called interest rate swap of a business owner sold by ING Bank. A swap is a complex financial instrument that is not traded on the exchange, but is traded over the counter, also referred to as OTC trading. He turned to me in 2012 because the fixed interest that business owner was promised with the swap construction had been increased during the term as a result of the so-called liquidity surcharge. This client had never heard of a swap until 2008 and had no interest in it. For the bank, it provided an additional product, namely a loan in combination with an interest rate swap, and the bank charged excessive commissions for these swaps, and bank employees received high sales commissions, bonuses. According to the bank, this financing structure was identical to a fixed rate loan. But the bank forgot to mention that the interest rate swap developed a market value during the term, and that the market value had to be covered by highly liquid collateral, as also called margin or margin credit, as with derivatives that are traded on the regulated market. The bank solved this by providing margin credit in the form of additional loans, without the customer knowing or having an interest in it. Although this extra loan was free, falling interest rates from 2009 onwards caused massive liquidity problems for banks due to the increasingly raging negative value of those swaps. It will come as no surprise that banks pass this problem on to their customers. And the small business customer was the easiest target. The liquidity surcharge was introduced and customers were deliberately pulled into default. But this was not all, because banks secretly had this collateral financed by their own insurers and pension funds and did not deduct this financing from their solvency. The insurers and pension funds also run into problems due to the fall in interest rates. The house of cards collapsed. and this in turn had an effect on borrowers. With the swap, bank caused the financial carnage, and many business owners, also borrowers without the swap, were dragged into bankruptcy by their bank. However, over the years, I discovered that the house of cards was deliberately dismantled at the expense of the citizen and at the expense of prosperity and the real economy. And that's why I have decided to have my story written down in the book Worst Bank Scenario, which has also been available in English since November 23. Worst Bank Scenario shows that the route that the 200 billion shortage travels from its inception at the financial groups in the Netherlands to the balance sheets of the Dutch Central Bank and the ECB as part of the new so-called multipolar monetary system. At the same time, the Dutch state guarantees in favor of EU emergency funds grew since 2008 to 200 billion euro. During this route, the Dutch collateral shortage was unlawfully placed with Dutch pension funds as ABP and pension funds PFZW. Although state aid could be requested for this liquidity shortage in 2008, which I will explain later, Dutch banks had apparently decided that they would rather obtain guarantees through pension pots than from the government. After all, the latter was bad for competition and for bonuses. In addition, the new banking model that was part of the intended monetary system would also obtain highly liquid collateral through pension funds and insurers. That is why the pension reform is necessary, which was implemented in the Netherlands last year amid much protest and now in doubt after the elections. Although my journey started in 2012 with a business owner duped by a so-called interest rate swap, I quickly discovered that it's actually all about collateral. The bank covers the interest rate risk of lending money long-term and attracting money short-term with interest rate swaps. And because of interest rate swaps have a price, also called market value, due to fluctuating market interest rates, professional parties who conclude these interest rate swaps also require collateral from each other. As mentioned, this collateral must be highly liquid. A lively trade in collateral has emerged. Lower quality collateral, such as packaged mortgage loan, also known as mortgage-backed securities, is temporarily exchanged for high quality collateral. This could be money or government bonds from countries that have their budgets in order. However, because there is not sufficiently high liquid collateral and fewer government bonds are suitable due to the deteriorating financial position of the member states, it was decided that European bonds, called Euro bonds, should be the solution. It's therefore the shortage of highly liquid collateral that is the actual reason for creating a debt union. Under the guise of climate, inclusiveness, energy, security, education, etc., the bond press has been encouraged to print new EU debt. And the liquidity shortage that existed in 2007 was therefore a collateral shortage as a result of the use of the interest rate swaps. The majority of the money printed by central banks after 2007 did not end up with the citizen, as banks led to believe, but filled the bank's collateral gaps. How have these gaps been filled? The former president of the Dutch Central Bank, Nigel, joined the Bank for International Settlement in 2006, the institution that rolled out rules for banks worldwide to regulate liquidity, and liquid collateral in particular. From that moment on, the demand for liquid collateral increased and upgrading collateral became the new lucrative business of both central banks and market parties such as Goldman Sachs and BlackRock. Customer collateral had to be transformed into collateral that banks could use for their OTC derivatives. And since most customers' collateral, such as mortgages, is not tradable, banks bundle them and package them in digital packages so that the bank can trade them digitally. And this is called originate to distribute and forms the core of the new monetary system. In our book, we call these so-called securitized mortgage loans digital boxes. The value of these digital boxes depends on the quality of the mortgage loans in those boxes. And in the event that the economy deteriorates and people can no longer bear their mortgage payments, the value of the digital boxes decreases. From 2007 onwards, banks no longer sell these packaged mortgages in digital boxes to third parties, but keep them back themselves and exchange them with, for example, pension funds and insurers for collateral that is highly liquid, such as cash balance or for government bonds issued by member states that are financially healthy and have a high rating. That happens in the repo market. Banks can then upgrade and use its own illiquid mortgages for their own OTC derivatives. And we explain all this in our book. But the interest rate swap also offered a solution for the bank to make the customer's collateral, such as this mortgage right, liquid. As mentioned, banks lend liquid collateral to their own customers without customers knowing or having any interest in it. I discovered these margin accounts in 2012, and in 2013 I discovered the closure of ING's whole OTC reporting system, by which the bank removed these margin accounts, and therefore margin from the bank systems. Other banks also removed the margin credit from their administration and systems in the following years, and they carried out this fraud with the help of the supervisors and other authorities. And to finance this margin credit, banks had provided internal collateral with insurers and pension funds, creating fake collateral. And that model had to be ended, and it was the UK that came up with the guarantee scheme for this in 2008. And this liquidity support in the form of state guarantees was subsequently copied by the European Commission and the European Central Bank in the rest of Europe. There was not much fuss in the media about this liquidity support. Moreover, banks did not tell that this concerned liquidity management with regard to OTC derivatives. And while the film Margin Call was released in 2011, the worst bank scenario was being executed behind the scenes. Mario Draghi took office as president of the ECB in the same year and opened the collateral counter to replace the EU guarantee scheme. And at the same time, a European regulation was issued that forms the basis for the flood of EU subsidies that are now being justified under the guise of war and pandemic. In our book we explain why ECB's balance sheet is exploding and that this is related to the shortage of highly liquid collateral. I have been litigating for 12 years now on behalf of the SMEs, public healthcare and educational institutions, housing associations, real estate funds, private investors, etc., about the so-called liquidity surcharge and the downside on collateral requirements. This surcharge, which was introduced in the Netherlands in 2009, as a result of which clients with a variable interest rate were suddenly confronted with a much higher interest rate, even for financing structures with a swap, was justified by banks on the basis that banks had to borrow more expensively on the money market. And it is now clear that the liquidity surcharge did not concern the money market at all, and that Euribor and LIBOR manipulation was a sideshow. It wasn't even about extending credit to customers. In 2013, during my first hearing in this file, I wondered out loud in the courtroom whether ING did not have administered the liquid client's collateral on its balance sheet, not knowing that ING, ABN AMRO, Rabobank and SNS at that time were jointly carrying out worst-case scenario in which they secretly adjusted balance sheets, operational systems and contracts. In the same year, but I didn't know it at that time, the Dutch Central Bank launched collateral accounts for non-monetary purposes, such as collateral management for OTC derivatives, as part of this monetary operation. In the interest of society, I reported the abuses I found in the files and the collateral fraud I had discovered at ING to the conduct supervisor AFM at the beginning of 2014. However, the AFM did nothing with my fraud reports. In the following month, I was approached, no fewer than twice, for positions at EY, ING's accountant. After that first report, I continued to report also to other authorities. I also went to the media and attention was paid to these abuses. More and more victims came to me, and together with a number of other lawyers and financial specialists, I started working hard for collective compensation, which ultimately came to fruition for some of the victims. And although my client won at the Court of Appeal in 2015 and at the Supreme Court in 2019, where the interest rate swap was annulled on the grounds of error and the liquidity risk was recognized by the highest court, these rulings are still ignored. And in 2018, I discovered the core of the fraud. Extensive balance sheet corrections in ING's 2016 annual accounts. The 2014 and 2015 balance sheets were corrected retroactively. No less than 160 billion was added in 2014 and 163 billion in 2015. And at the same time, I didn't yet know the total collateral deficit of 200 billion, and to look that the Dutch state, the AFM, the Dutch Central Bank, and the bank insurance chose to conceal this deficit. As of that moment, I understood the enormous interest behind the interest rate swap and collateral fraud, and I realized that my countless reports had been in vain. In 2018, I have turned to the American SEC as a whistleblower, and at the beginning of 2023, I went to the CFTC. The credit crisis was not unexpected, but was the result of the new monetary instrument that the establishment wants to introduce at all costs to perfect the European monetary and political union. It is therefore no coincidence that Draghi is now mentioned as a candidate for president of the European Council. Draghi is one of the inventors of the worst bank scenario. As president of Italy's central bank and chairman of the Financial Stability Forum, Draghi delivered a speech on June 4th, 2007 on monetary policy and new financial instruments. One thing Draghi talked about was the implications of the originate to distribute model for setting monetary policy. And up to that moment, the ECB had controlled the money supply, and thus inflation as well, through interest rates. And banks were key to this old-fashioned monetary transformation process. The sensitivity of bank deposits to interest rate changes gave monetary policy a powerful tool to influence both bank funding and their financial markets activities. And as soon as the ECB raised policy rates, all market interest rates in Europe rose. This brought down the demand for loans and reduced spending, resulting in falling prices and lower inflation. However, that interest rate sensitivity changed at the beginning of this century. And according to Draghi, the development of new financial products and securitizations, the packaging of and reselling of loans, has changed this classic transmission mechanism, and with it, the way monetary policy works. The impact of monetary policy on the availability and cost of bank loans had diminished, Draghi said. And the changing distribution of credit risk in the economy also affected how the transmission mechanism works, according to Draghi. And Draghi added, however, that central banks did not yet fully understand how those influences work. He believed that the financial system's resilience to larger shocks would still need to be fully tested. And Draghi warned that the financial system was becoming increasingly uncontrollable. And this was in 2007. In the same year, central banks harmonized their collateral policies, and the construction of a new collateral management system of the European central banks started. All collateral was centralized by central banks and large market participants such as ING, Goldman Sachs and BlackRock. This EU central bank collateral management system will be ready in November 2024 and is part of the new multipolar monetary system based on different currencies. This system will run on a number of interconnected global blockchain and distributed ledger technology payments and collateral management platforms for professional market participants combined with digital central bank money, such as the digital euro. for both retail and professional market participants, the central bank digital currency or the CBDC. I expect that in this system, the centralized monetary systems of the world powers will be interlinked, and that the IMF will act as the intermediary between them. In 2008, world leaders called this multipolar monetary system Bretton Woods 2.0, and they saw the centralization of collateral as the indispensable bedrock of this new system. And central banks started to buy gold as of 2011. But this collateral consists of not only gold, as in the classic Bretton Woods framework, but also includes other elements, such as bundled and packaged bank loans and emission rights, such as carbon emission rights. And gold is being held to hedge the market value of the bonds and other inferior collateral, which they hold as collateral upgrader. To fill the enormous collateral shortages and the boost to collateral trading, new bonds of very good quality are needed. And this explains the eagerness with which European bonds are now being issued. Under the guise of Next Generation EU, 800 billion is currently being spread uncontrollably across Europe. In our book, in which we explain the link between the banking crisis and this megalomaniac European project, we warn against this excessive debt creation. Money that is taken from our pension funds, among other things, and disappears into the pockets of wrong people, and this enormous debt will have to be repaid by our children. And that is why our book is dedicated to our children. And as already mentioned, in 2022, the European Central Bank introduced a new instrument without much media attention, the Transmission Protection Instrument, or TPI. And the TPI allows the ECB to purchase sovereign bonds issued by countries which face sharp interest rate movements that are not justified given their economic fundamentals and monetary transmission. If necessary, the program may be extended to include corporate bonds, which means garbage in, cash out. And before 22, this instrument was simply called unconventional policy. And under the guise of the credit crisis and pandemic, we were able to get used to this instrument. And in worst bank scenario, we will call this bank model 3.0 and Draghi's window, discount window. And even more perverse banking model, rolled out without democratic participation, but at the expense of the citizen. I know now that the worst bank scenario has largely been completed in 2022 with the acquisition by Goldman Sachs of ING's former asset manager of pension funds and insurers, named Nationale Nederlanden Investment Partners. Goldman Sachs, the former employer of Sunak, Draghi, and many others, and the current employer of Barroso, plays a major role in the collateral fraud and in setting up the new monetary system. And as a lawyer, I unintentionally came across this extensive fraud and corruption, and therefore even became an enemy of the state and the authorities that should actually be here for me and my clients. Due to various chains of abuses, more and more people have been sucked into this network corruption, whether consciously or not, and have become complicit in the extensive fraud. Fraud that was necessary to mask the fact that the financial system is a Ponzi scheme, in which those in power mainly line their pockets. And the book is not only an indictment, because also a revelation from an insider who accidentally found herself on the other side as a lawyer. And it shows that network corruption poses a serious threat to our democratic constitutional state and the well-being of our citizens. And it is therefore a cry for help that I have expressed with all the associated risks and out to anyone who wants to hear it. And with the hope that something will change for our children and that the bill for these serious abuses will not be placed on them. Because, last but not least, the book is primarily intended to activate and to inspire the reader to build a new system. The system must once again become a utility that is fair, transparent, sustainable, and safe. It is an illusion to think that there is a free market in Europe. Information asymmetry, perverse incentives and network corruption seriously disrupt market forces. But this is not only disrupt market forces, but also government action. With public funds, the Marxist ideal world is created. And this means that we must build a society in which transparency is basis, perverse incentives are eliminated, and network corruption is no longer possible. And this means that we must trust each other, dare to speak to each other, and be approachable ourselves. Yes. And for our children, freedom is a given. But they will only understand what freedom is when that freedom is taken away. But then it's too late. And we must therefore teach our children to cherish their freedom. At the same time, we must ensure that we protect that freedom for them by not getting sucked into political wars, fighting corporatocracy and corruption, and opposing the unhealthy, unfair, and unsafe financial system.
Wow.
Anyone have a question for Hester? Right there you go.
Thank you very much. I can't say very much because I'm in court at the moment and I'm back in on Monday on this subject matter, but I just wanted to say how this affects some people in Ireland in relation to one particular bank that I've researched for 3 years, 80 hours a week, and I've got to the root of what's going on in terms of interest rate swaps. So if you take an average individual who took out one of these interest rate fixes, they got a fixed rate, thought they were fixing their rate, but turned out to be a derivative. So on a, say, a 750,000 loan, there's no drawdown, it's a separate standalone contract. And the parent or the counterparty, who turned out to be the parent in London, books the profit up front from day one, and they book the liability in your name day one, but you're not aware of it, you're unaware that this existed. So they took your collateral, they took your assets as security in this. So on a 750,000 fixed rate, over, you're looking at an interest rate of about, say, 500,000. They increase your liability by 500,000 and you're unaware of it. Now, what I discovered was that when my assets, my property, my home, my business was liquidated, the proceeds of that, 90% of the proceeds of that went to HM Treasury. Now, how did the assets liquidated from Newlands Cross down in Clondalkin Village end up on RBS's balance sheet? It ended up in HM Treasury's balance sheet. This is how it works. And a lot of people here have been victim to this and they're not aware of it, or they have a sense of it, but they don't quite know. And you explained it on the broader terms, how it works. So if RBS, so HM Treasury bailed out RBS to the tune of 43.511 billion, 31st of December 08. There are the dates I can prove, not the date it actually happened. The 43.511 billion was the total loan book of Ulster Bank in Ireland, and Ireland was to be liquidated come hell or high water. Everyone was to be liquidated, whether you were in default or not. They gave them a retrospective right to trigger people into default for 2 years, up to the end of 2010. And then they set about setting conditions, taking guarantees and bundling up everything on demand to get into position to liquidate everybody, right? So when your assets are liquidated, the money has to go back to the HM Treasury, and it's flowing through a bank on Molesworth Street, and I have documented it all. So the 43.511 billion is just loans and advances to customers. That's not the underlying security. The underlying security could be 100 to 200 to 300 billion that they've liquidated in asset stripped Ireland. And this is an example of what's going on in Ireland, which describes what you're talking about on a broader and a larger scale. And we really need to get together and understand the damage and the asset stripping that's going on in Ireland and how it is being orchestrated. By the way, the EU filed this agreement with the SEC in September '09. So they're fully aware we're not dealing with debt, we're dealing with tradable securities. But thank you very much for the bigger perspective.
Thanks very much, Hester. Next we're going to have Trevor Mealham. Trevor Mealham used to be an auctioneer, I think, for his troubles, and ran a successful listing system, and was in the battles a bit like myself.
So I had a network called INEA, which was the independent network of estate agents. We grew to about 650 estate agents subscribed, and we had probably about 1,300 computer users. Is that any better?
No.
Cool. Hello? Hello?
1, 2, 1, 2.
Back to me. Right, so I had an estate agency network in England, Wales, Scotland. We had about 650 estate agents on board. We developed something similar to the American system, a multi-list. I get how the computer systems work a little bit. I was also in that time for 10 years, I used to go up to government as an industry stakeholder advisor. I was never a civil servant or anything like that, unlike Nigel and so on. But I used to advise on property fraud, money laundering, that sort of thing. So, anyway, that's that. So going in, when I put slides together, I don't know about over here in Ireland, I hope so, but do any of you recognise these guys? Good, because as we were coming over on the plane, I asked 3 people when we hit Ireland, have you heard about Bais versus the post office? And they all said no. Well, I thought that screws up my presentation. But isn't it amazing that all the police and everything else, it took drama to really get people to understand what we go through. Ben? Excellent. Now, I think if you watch Mr. Bais, this is the computer they show on it. Now I don't know, but that little blue light that flashes on the episodes is probably brighter than my kids' gaming computers. And what it was doing, the system was altering the audit. Now I think that could happen in 3 ways. Ben? So I think there's another character in Mr. Bais. I think there's another brain, and I think the other brains in these frauds, in the banking frauds, and in the post office are the computer. Now the difficulty is, if you're Ulster Bank, or you're Lloyds, or you're RBS, or Clydesdale, or whoever you are, where's the common computer system? And you're not going to see it. If you're a postmaster, you're going to see the... Can you go back one? If you're a postmaster and you got taken down by that fraud, the common denominator is the Horizon system. And if you look at the actual Horizon system, it's very different to what was in the film with this bright blue flashing light. But the banks, I believe, have used these are state frauds. It's not just the banks doing it, the banks are being allowed to do this. I see it as state crime. So you go too quick. So with the post office, it's the Horizon system. Can anybody here think on the different banks, when you go and report fraud to the police, the Garda, etc., what computer systems are different bank fraud victims then engage with? It's maybe more applicable to England and Wales and so on.
Action fraud.
You knew the answer, Brad. So the answer is, when we go to the police in England, we get sent to a Quango to action fraud. And what they do, they tell you to go online, they give you 2,500 characters, not words, and it's not enough information. You're not allowed any prima facie evidence, which is your documents that are going to prove the fraud. So what's happening, your fraud cases get blighted before you can go any further. And in criminal law, you get mens rea, guilty mind, and actus rea, guilty act. So if you take it, an average case that we might build for our victims in these files and so on, there might be 10 or 15 case summary pages about what happened. We then might do an impact statement. We've been doing that more lately because there's more to it than just fraud and bribery and secret commissions and so on. And then you're going to have some prima facie evidence. So let's say a file might be 50, 60, 70 pages. What action fraud allow you to do under the UK Home Office accounting rules, and this goes right up to the Home Office. We've got evidence down here that Priti Patel knew about this. We sent her evidence, she did nothing with it. Also when she became Home Secretary then. But, so can you sit down? So basically, if you imagine when you go on action fraud, you're only allowed half a page of A4 to report your crime. It's not enough. So what you're told is, you're told by action fraud, I'm sorry, we've looked at your case, we can't see anything, we're sorry for how you feel, but we're now going to close it down, you have to go civil, and they put you in the court system. Okay, leave that there. So I think there's two parts to the frauds. If we take Mr. Bates, the reason I've done this, there is so much we could go into, and obviously we've only got a time limit today, but people have been saying the post office frauds are just like the banking frauds. They're not. And already in Parliament we're getting Kevin Hollingbrake saying, oh, it's nothing like it. And we've got to be ready for that argument. Now the thing is, if we take the post office system, I see three scenarios. One, I don't believe that they're putting out in the press. The one that they're putting out in the press is that the modem kept going down. So if somebody entered £128, when it went back on, it put that amount again. And over the months, years, it would add up tens of thousands, and then the postmasters would get taken to court. The money wouldn't be there, it'd be a false audit. So in that case, the post office was calling the victims the fraudsters. Now with banking frauds, it's the other way around. We have prima facie evidence and so on, and there are a number of modus operandi, methods which are used processes. But in our case, the evidence is stripped out by the computer system, the action fraud system. So in a way, we're calling them fraudsters and they're extinguishing the fraud from it. We're thrown in the civil by the banks. And the postmasters, they had the information added. So that's the two real different things I see. With the postmasters, I don't buy into the modem going down. I think there was either coding added, or as later came out, most IT systems, I know that from when we built INEA, programmers leave a back door where you can go in and alter bits. So I think it's one of the two bits there. Okay. But I think part one is very, very different. But I think part two, where people say, Mr. Bates, this happened to us, I go with that. I go with that 99%. And I think in the last 6 weeks, I've had two victims phone me, suicidal, silly hour of the night. I have these funny time things, and if it gets really late and my phone goes, I'm sure Ben's the same. Tracy will look at me, I'm sure Sarah will look at Ben and say the best answer to that. And sometimes it's somebody sitting in a lay-by with tablets, that sort of thing. That's the not nice bit. I'm aware of 63 suicide attempts, and some of those went through with it. Not nice. And the other thing is, a lot of the kids, when they get around the age 12, 13, they take in what mum and dad are going through, and it affects them too. Now, with the Horizon system, if you take it Post Office, Horizon, you've got that there. If you take it with us, you might have an RBS, Clydesdale, Lloyd's BSU, all the Lloyd's brands are bloody awful, should go to jail, and so on. So this is where they're later going to say that the banks weren't connected. How do you connect it? So I see that all these victims ended up going to actual fraud in 95% of our cases. Okay? Next one. Oh, sorry.
People just at the back having difficulty.
Right, okay. So, I had a lady come up to me earlier and said, this is a state. I totally agree with you. The bank's unhappy customers, us, we're sent into the state systems. We're sent to the Quango regulators that are run by the Treasury. We're sent to the Quangos that are run by the Home Office. And I could tell you the whole structure of the bits of law on that. But we go to Action Fraud, we go to FOSS, we go to the FCA, we go into the courts. They're all swearing over to the King and all that. So I agree, we're fighting the state. And we've even gone so far, we're looking at the stage of taking this to the Hague under the International Criminal Court Act 2001, Article 71F, which is, it's torture, it's human rights abuse. ECHR 3, the European Court for Human Rights, Article 3 is torture. Moving on. Ben? Ben, you go too quick and then you don't go quick. Right, so action fraud. This is where we get sent to. I think in Ireland you just get sent to the police and so on. Lloyds Bank. Lloyds Bank have got a great logo, the black horse. Part Dick Turpin. I was at the Lloyds Bank AGM. Mr. Budenberg, the chairman of Lloyds Bank, who's also the chair of Crown Estates, he was on stage and they had a bloody black horse. And I said, Mr. Budenberg, this is not very nice for victims when you've got Black Bess on stage behind you. But, and so on. But that we've covered. But Lloyds Bank pays £500,000 a year to action fraud. So that's why I'm bringing in this government system that the bank is funding and so on. So, we've got to start looking at the UK state, who's involved. I'm not saying all Privy Council are bad, I'm not saying all barristers, all lawyers are bad, but quite a few of them are. And thanks to the lawyers and the barristers that are here today, hopefully, as Ben said, you're going to learn from this, and so on. We've called out High Court judges. Professor Nigel Harper here, in my case, there was 23 of us listening in on the last day. We've been in court 3 days. And to be fair, we kicked the barristers backside. But on the last day, it was done over the internet. We've had 3 days in court. And one of our victims is a solicitor, an RBS victim. And she dialed in. Why, I don't know, it cost her 80 quid. The rest of us, we went in on the Microsoft Teams. And there was a tea break in the afternoon, 15 minutes, where the screen went down, the sound went, but on, I won't mention the name, but on this semi-retired lawyer's phone, she then heard the judge colluding with the Lloyds Bank barrister, and they said, Harper, Professor Harper, evidence is dangerous. That's a good compliment. Mine was, he's a vindictive little sod. That's fine by me. But these are the people, so Ben, can you go back? So we've got Privy Council, Crown Estates, you've got the Home Office, the Treasury, Cabinet, Ministers. Not saying all the ministers are bad, but there's some like Dr. Davis, one of the Conservative ones, and he has been phenomenal, and I think he gets the mental health issues on this. One of our victims is really supportive. But some of the MPs are arses, and so on. You've got the police, the National Crime Agency, there's a good one. Lynn Owens given 19 folders by Anthony Stansfield, the ex-police crime commissioner. She sat them on for 2.5 years. And then what happens to a lot of these people that cover the frauds up? They get promoted, and then they get a goal. They get an order of bath or a knighthood or something like that. It's reward for covering it up. Okay. Now I think with the crime, there's 3 silos. Again. So I think in the modus operandi, the first silo, you've got bits like, and there's more, but if we throw in these and sort of categorise them, the way a lot of the modus operandi are done relate to bribery, fraud. So fraud is, party A deceives party B, party A's gain, party B's loss for the intended permanent loss of property, bricks mortar, money, intellectual, chattels. You then need to bring in the mens rea and show how the person knew about it, and the actus rea, how were they actioning it. Bribery, a lot of the D's R's we looked for, and we've got evidence here. We were finding someone like Lloyds Bank were raising £250,000 clumps. So in Graham's case here, I sat down 5 weeks and went through Graham's D's R with him. We found loads of these 250Ks. And I hope Graham don't mind me saying, we'd even found in Graham's file a care home, nursing home, that he didn't even own. How's that? Let's just do that, stick it on that customer, we close it down, ruin their lives, and just carry on. But you've got perjury, you've got lying in the courts, you've got bribery, which are secret commissions. With me today, I've got Martin. Martin was the expert in wood versus commercial furs. And that's quite a landmark case. That came in after Plevin versus Paragon, which was about secret commissions, and that was ruled by Lord Sumption and others in the Supreme Court. That was quite a big thing. But the wood versus commercial first is important. We had 3 law lords say it's bribery and fraud, and that was joined with another case, and in our files here, there's another 19 underwriting sheets that are the same. So we took that information to Avon Somerset Police, and they just cover it up. Behind me, I've got what I call a secret police lawyer. I used to see him at family weddings and funerals, and I used to hate his guts for 4 years. And then one day Trace said, he's a really nice guy, and he is. And he said, if ever you get trouble with the police and that, give me a buzz. So when we then go to the police, we look more at their process. Rather than going and saying, I'm a victim of, and how bad it is, we do that. But we also ask the police, have you done the first scoping? Have you done the evidential test, the public interest test? Have you gone to the CPS? And when we went, there was over 200 cases. It was no. So when we know the police are not following the processes, we know they're not doing what they should be. And then you're not going to get criminal investigations and these people that do all this crap in jail. Forgery, that's a big one. Non-disclosure, hearsay. That's great. If you're a newbie litigant person, the lawyers in here will know, if you don't dispute the hearsay, gosh, it's accepted. It could be any old crap. But it's accepted, and that would go against you in the court case. So, with that, the modus operandi, how they do it, you've got false valuations. They might value properties up high, above value. So they're already over the top. And then what the bank might do is manipulate the contract, unfair terms in consumer contracts, bait and switch. And then what they might do is do revaluations, and now they're going to go the other side of it. They might distort the loan to value valuations. That's now a default, and they're coming at you with the LPA receivers or whatever. Secret commissions, a lot of that people won't know about, the securitisation, duress, pushing people, to on in orders, personal guarantees. They manipulate you, they push you in a corner, they perhaps take the personal guarantee up, and then they come knocking on your door for it. I had a victim phone me the other day, and he said, they've just changed my manager, and he's in Lloyds BSU. Can they do that? I said, yeah. And I said, have they done this? Have they done that? Have they increased the personal guarantees? Yes. And he'd had a COVID loan. But the COVID loan is a newer version of the EFG loan. But that guy had about £7 million in asset. He's asset rich. I said, they're going to be coming for you. Okay, we now go on to silo 2. I think the other big crime is misconduct in public office. And this is when the police don't do their job. It's when the regulators don't do their job. Now, if they did their job, we wouldn't be here today. But you then get malfeasance, misfeasance, non-feasance. Malfeasance is when the office holder does something unlawfully, illegally, perverts matters. Misfeasance, the improper way of doing something that should have been done lawfully, legally. And And obviously, as you know, there's a big difference between lawful and legal. Non-feasance, when the official holder fails to do something which brings harm, and so on. The police oath, I do solemnly, etc., etc. When you get past the king bit, impartially uphold fundamental human rights. You get a repossession that you're trying to stop, and you get 8 coppers turn up with the ram. You know, you've got to think what you're doing. And what we tend to do, if someone's gone to appeal and that paperwork's in, we will then say to the police, do you know you're an oath officer? And we get loads of crap. It'll be, oh, it's a long time ago, or no, I can't remember it. And it's, well, you're here today doing your job, and a big part of your job is human rights, you know, to protect people's property. You then bring in bits like liberty of the subject. You've got, we took a new route. I said to my police lawyer early last year, and to Martin, I said, what if we remove fraud from these crimes? And they thought I was nuts. And they said, well, what's the point? And I said, well, we keep going to the police with fraud, we get sent to action fraud, we get sent to City of London. Rubbish. All fraud in the UK goes through the City of London. So my idea was, let's take it another way. So what we did, we started looking more into the human rights angle. And ECHR is torture. ECR number 3 is torture. And in the UK, you can't also take somewhere like the Hague, fraud, as the main thing. So what you've got to do in here, you've got to look at the International Criminal Court Act 2001 Article 7(1)(f), which aligns with the Rome Statute. So what we then started doing was getting a lot of our victims to do impact statements. I said, but unless you've had it in your case, the F word, fraud, you've got to leave it out. That's really alien to a lot of the victims, because for years they've been going to people saying, I'm a victim of fraud. So we try and break our cases up into 2. We've got the fraud as a case summary, and what we're now doing, we're saying, can we have the impact? So you've got leading up to the train crash, and then you've got the train crash and how life is afterwards. And a lot of people then get more than PTSD. If a soldier goes to war and they see their mate blown up or something like that, life eventually gets better. But for a bank fraud victim, you live this all the time. And again, the lawyers will know that Friday letter to ruin your weekend. You know, it's the mental abuse and so on. So we thought that there's something in this. The place that it then goes to, it no longer then goes to Action Fraud in the City of London. It goes to SO15. Have you seen on TV where you get the Central London police officers all dressed in black with guns? That's counter-terrorism, that's SO15. So what we did, we got about 30 victims around the UK, England, Wales, Scotland, to go and report. They walked into the police stations and they said, I'd like to report a crime. And the police would think it was a nicked bike or a noisy neighbour or something like that. And then it was, yes, what is it? We'd say, it's the crime against humanity. They didn't know what to do with it, it's brilliant. Now the thing is, the only police force in the UK that can do a crime against humanity is SO15. And a crime under the Home Office accounting rules, we're using their rules against them because a lot of people, a lot of the dummies that are doing the bit are taking orders from the people above. And that's how they do it. So we would go in and say, we'd like to report this, can we have an incident number? And they'd say, but we're not going to give you one. I'd say, well, you are going to give me one, I'm going to report you, because this is your rules. So go and get a sergeant or someone like that, and they give it to us. Now, we had 13 of these go through to the Met. You need 5+ to show systemic. Due to that, that then allowed us to engage with Dominic Murphy, Commander Dominic Murphy, head of SO15, Sir Mark Rowley, Khan, and then elevated up to the cabinet. And we've done that, we've exhausted that. And that's where we're coming on about the Hague bit. But interestingly, Nuremberg trials, 1945-6, 4 of the 22 on trial were bankers. How's that? Next. Yeah. So this is one of our victims. She said we can use a picture. And this is what it does to people. And CPTSD, you know, it's nasty. It goes on for years. Some of the human rights abuse in this living nightmare. Article 3, freedom from torture. Article 5, liberty. So when they bang Ben up, you should have. Article 5, get me out. Article 6, right to a fair trial. Article 8, respect private and family life, correspondence. And that's where this recent repossession, when the police said they'd stand down, by then there were 20 of them. And I said, but officer, we've got a really good senior officer. And I said, but Article 8, how can this lady be in our house when you've all gone? And the thugs are still outdoors. I said, so we want your protection officer. So we totally flipped it. We got into the property. When we turned up to the property, somebody had used a diamond disc grinder to get into the, don't know who done it, it's just there, very lucky. So there were 7 of us went in, we had a standoff with the police, and we quoted the law. We thought we're going to get arrested for this, because they don't know what they're doing. And we managed to get a senior cop out there, and he got it, and he knew his oath, in fairness. So he said, we're going to step down today. And I said, well, what about Article 8? Respect private life, etc. And he said, I'm going to ask those security guards for Santander to go. He said, then we go. And that's what happened. So we totally flipped it. And we didn't get arrested. And I had some love. Onwards. These are very important. So you're going to court, and the bank's lawyers will use legalese. I like to mix it a bit. So what you've got is liberty of the subject, 1354. And a High Court judge told me this. He said, Mr. Meadow, liberty of the subject. And it's in the Bill of Rights as well. It's very, very important, you know, use it. And it says there's got to be due process. If you know that the court or the lawyers, etc., are not doing as they should be, raise it and say, I've not had due process. And that's, again, how we got this lady in this repo. There was an appeal going on. It was the 3rd of January. And we said she hasn't exhausted all her process yet. And they went with it. The other one, which everybody knows, is Magna Carta. There's another interesting one in Magna Carta that people overlook, which is Article 45. Now, a lot of the Magna Carta, they say it doesn't exist anymore. But surely this one exists, because it says, Article 45 in Magna Carta, we, which would be the establishment, will appoint justices, constables, sheriffs, or other officials, only men and ladies, only men that know the law of the realm and are minded to keep it well. So, if the police come out, make sure they abide by the law. Next one. Okay, this is how you handle a court case. This could go completely wrong, or it could work. So I'm in court, I've got all my case moved up to the High Court, very good judge, Judge Perry in the lower court. It's not so good ones down there, but anyway, I'm now up in the High Court. And I look up, Master Cook, done my homework, want to know what he likes, what he doesn't like, and so on. I don't want to upset this guy. So, I go in laughing. And Master Cook says, this is not a laughing matter, Mr. Meadow. Can you explain yourself? Got to be good now, isn't it? So I said, well, Your Honour, I don't think you're a fool. I don't think you're an idiot. But I think the other side does. So that's a good bold statement. It's a good opening, because you've now just said to the judge, potentially you're an idiot. Cool. So now you've got to take it further. And he said, do you mind explaining yourself? Next one, Ben. And I said, yes, Your Honour. I said, Lloyds Bank are here today with their lawyers, who have been on the case for 4 years, and they are trying to use a land registry document which ties in with what your judge is raising here. So this is, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. And I said, Your Honour, Lloyds Bank are here today and they're using a false instrument, which comes under the Forgery and Counterfeit Act 1991. And he said, can you explain that? I said, yeah. I said, if I had a road car tax disc, and I paid 12 months duty, and I photocopied it, and I put the copy in my car window. Could I go on the road? And he said, well, you tell me. And I said, I've got MOT, I've got insurance, I've got the road tax disc. I said, but it's a copy. I said, but it doesn't matter because it represents the intellectual value that I've paid that says I've got an MOT, I've got insurance, and you put all that together, I can go on the road for 12 months. I said, but what happens, Your Honour, if I leave that in the car window, like you would Land Registry, so a bank will place a charge at Land Registry. I had a meeting a year before this with the CEO of Land Registry, the head ledger clerk, and chief legal. And I said, once the bank's placed the charge, if they don't update you when they've sold it to the SPV, what happens? And they said, well, we wouldn't know about it. The ledger will remain as it is. And that's why I'm very interested in what Ben and the judge and Charlie and Brian and all you guys are doing over here, because it ties in, you know, nobody listens to me, I'm a little nothing, but you've got a judge, and so on. So basically I said, if I leave that in my car window and I've cashed in the original, that becomes a false instrument. Can I now drive on the road, Your Honour? And he said, no. And I said, that's why I think you're not a fool, and that's why I think they're idiots for bringing a land registry document to court that is void, it's false. These are the files we've been doing down here. Martin helps me a hell of a lot. People don't know it. Martin, Nigel, Andy, loads of them. Even Graham, one of our victims. You know, when it's rain or shine and we're protesting, P or Floyd's Bank, Graham's there. And we've got others like it as well. These started because we had a leaked document. We did protests and we managed to get a number of investigations into the failure of Avon Sunset Police. And the officer who done it was Nick Johnson. He phoned me and he said, Mr. Mealham, can you explain Bais and switch to me? I said, yeah, sure. And it's basically where you bait somebody and you switch the deal and so on. Imagine when you walk up the high street and someone's selling the posh radios in a box, you get it home and it's not that tall. It's that sort of thing. And a lot of people make promises by the bank and you'll get so far and then they pull the rug on you, it's new contracts and they're gearing up to collapse you. So Nick John said to me, Mr. Meadow, I think you know more about fraud than I do. And I said, I don't think so, Nick. I said, you're a DS. He said, do you not think so? I said, no, I know more about fraud than you. I said, and if that's over, I'm coming for your pension. That was a few years ago. I sent him a text just leading up to Christmas. I said, Nick, how's our pension doing? So one of the documents I got back was his pre-final report, 33 pages, and I knew a lot of the other cases, like Ben would know a lot of the other cases. But when I started going through it, I thought, no, this is not right. This officer is whitewashed it. He's then got promoted. He also played part in cover up with the HMRC shredding frauds. But he sent me this document, and it was about 11 of the cases. I've been building up a box. What do you do when people phone you up, or they come up and say, this is my case? You write it down. I'm sure Ben does it. You end up with a box that you don't know what to do with, but you know you can't throw it away. So what we did, we then started adding these to various volumes. We've now looked at hundreds of cases. But one of the documents in there is a leaked police report. And they said, could we have it back? And I said, no, go screw yourself. I've had 2 raids from the police, but I don't care. One of the raids, we had the files, and I made sure all the experts that I work with had copies. We thought one of us was going to get raided. I was the lucky one. Tracy said, Trevor, we've got 4 City of London, I don't live in London, we've got 4 City of London officers. I thought, okay, so they come in, and they said, we're looking for paperwork. I said, well, you must want these. And they said, well, can we take them? I said, how many copies do you want? They were trying to use it against me, and they took me up to London. Halfway up, I said to David, the police officer, you realise you've got a problem now, David? And he said, why? I said, because I've got 96 case files here, and they've just been picked up. I said, I've been trying to get these to you. You've driven down to my house. I said, you've now got knowledge of circumstance. So they put me on bail for a year. Boy, that screwed up the meetings. And then after a year, they said, "Would you like to come and pick the files up?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, we're going to burn them." So I've got that from City of London in black and white. From all this crap comes out, they burn evidence. This is the last one. If we've got some of this stuff, we haven't got some of the real private stuff. We've got a website, projecthague.com, and it's our journey. We're not there yet. We visited there. We needed a feel for the building. We met Hester over there, and so on. Some really good people in this. So this is, if the government are not going to do what they should, then that's what we aim to take in, and that's me. Any questions?
What was that case? Wood, you were saying goods versus?
It's wood versus commercial first.
Thank you.
And that's been in the hands of police, and they did nothing with it. We even got a letter from the Assistant Chief Constable, because police over in the UK were doing crime plans, and Martin happened to notice that they'd removed the word fraud out of their crime plan. So we asked the Assistant Chief Constable, "Can you tell us why fraud's out of it, son?" He went into it, and then Martin done another one and said, "So you're saying all fraud is criminal," which we know it is. And he said, "Yes." Well, when we had various meetings with them, we reminded them, because wood versus commercial first is 3 law lords saying it's bribery and fraud. And the bribery on that one was secret commissions. Thank you.
Sorry, I have one question.
Yep.
Have you come across anybody on your travels that tried to redeem the loan and could not get security documents, mortgage, bank person, completed mortgage, back from the bank? So in other words, when they're trying to do reverse, what we all did when we signed the loan document application, I'm now here to present to the bank the money to give the bank to redeem my loan. And the bank, the main pillar bank of this society in Ireland, AIB, is refusing to hand it back.
Okay, so that's
As an alternative, I said to the bank, "Okay, can I write paid in full after I inspect the document?" "Oh no, or you can't write your original documents in meaning to people."
Yeah, so a lot of the documents would get destroyed. In my case, it went on for 4 years where we kept asking for the original wedding document. They couldn't come up with it. Well, they couldn't come up with it, so they sent it on. But it's like a DSAR. Probably most of you are aware of a DSAR, data subject access request, and you've got GDPR, which is data protection. And then there's different schools of thought on it. Some people will say, "Here's a long list. I want to know about the SPV. I want to know about the CDOs. I don't do that. I just keep it simple. I just say, "Dear Data Controller, Lloyds Bank, whoever it is, read a sort code number, account number. I would like the full non-redacted data in reference to me, my partner Tracy, etc., etc. 30 days and so on." I find if you restrict it by putting loads of questions, they will work on that, and they'll send you. They're working on it, send them. So by just saying send everything. But the other thing, I don't know if it applies over here, but in the UK, we've got a thing called the Bankers Books Evidence Act 1879. And if you've got someone like Nigel was the the first time I met Nigel was at a big meeting like this. And Nigel came in saying, about bankers, and that he was originally at Lloyds Bank. And we thought, "Are you for real? You're a banker, you destroyed us lot." But please treat Nigel and Hester with an awful lot of respect. They are phenomenal people. They turned against the establishment, and so on. But if you've got somebody to Nigel's level, Nigel used to inspect the books of Lloyds and RBS head office. So he's a real star player. And there is no reason that a High Court should not allow someone like Nigel as an auditor in to look at the internal ledger, which will show the loan construction. So that could be worth looking into. And if I can now introduce Professor Nigel Harper. Just back there. So, as I say, the first time I met Nigel, I was at a SME Alliance meeting in London, and Nigel introduced himself as a top banker, and we thought, for real, coming in the lion's den. Nigel was at HMRC. I'll let him explain more about what he's done, but he's actually given evidence to jail some of these buggers, and so on.
Thanks, Trevor.
Trevor, I just want to get off the floor there. I just want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Now, the man down there asked a question about doing data access requests in his own file, which is yeah. To do. Now, what the government is doing at the minute is, and it is load, but not be talked about, the government is blanking out an awful lot of information on land forms.
So what we need to happen really is for this to go criminal. You've got enough people here to show systemic patterns,
yep.
And maybe some of these good lawyers can help with it.
Yep.
If you go criminal, your disclosure level is so much greater. Otherwise, you're going to get reams of paper through that is all blacked out. When me and Tracy were watching this Bais versus the Post Office, Tracy kept looking at me. I get on with this crap every day, as I understand Ben does with Sarah. Sarah keeps your house in order, keeps Ben in order, and Tracy does the same for me. But the place we really need to take this is criminal. And when we were watching Mr. Bates, Tracy kept looking, and I said, I know, Tracy, they've done that to us.
We're just a little bit running short of time. Can we leave? No, we leave the questions at the end. We're running behind. We're running behind. Listen, hold on a sec. Please. We'll give you time at the end. Please. We'll give you time at the end. Please. We'll talk to them at the back. Will you please talk to them at the back? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Nigel. Away you go.
Well, it's lovely to be here. I'm very sorry the subject's about terrorism in banking and terrorism in finance. The very stability of our society is about fairness. A crime scene is about the collection of facts. Our job of honest bankers and honest people is to find and assemble those facts without bias or prejudice. How many of you or your companies represented here today have been fined and paid fines using shareholders' funds? That's addressed to bankers. Do you remember the comment about RBS when they said let customers hang themselves?
Yeah.
That is bloody appalling, I have to say, and it really upsets me. I am so angry about all this. I joined banking in 1971 with Lloyds Bank, and I had a brilliant manager, John Meek. And John told me on the first day, he took me into his office, he did two things. Firstly, he showed me his pay slip. He said, if you want to get that, you've got to work hard and you've got to study. The second thing he said, whenever you get a customer, treat them as you would your mum and dad. And that has held me in good stead all my life. I've only ever repossessed one person and it hurt me to do that. But I drove from Solihull to the New Forest. I spent 3 hours in their sitting room talking to the husband and wife, explaining why I was there, and I was there to try and protect them and make sure they kept their house. The bloke told me to FO, and I had no option, and that was the problem we had. I was prepared to carry him, keep him in the house, and everything else. So it's a double-edged sword, this, and we've got to work. I mean, the bankers have really got to work with you guys, because they don't. Anyway, I'll move on now to the main point of the presentation. The subject slide 2, yeah, that's it. That's it, good. These are the topics I'm going to talk about, albeit that I've got to cut it short, but there's one bit I'm going to focus on, and that is the failure of corporate governance and internal audit. I used to be an internal auditor, and I did it for about 6 years. You wouldn't believe what I've uncovered. And when I worked for HMRC, I was responsible for investigating Lloyds Bank and RBS balance sheets, and they're a crock of shit put it bluntly. And I have to say, they are not fit for purpose. And we had numerous problems. I actually had a Chancellor of the Exchequer phone my boss and tell me to get off the case, because I'd given them a spreadsheet that I wanted them to complete for every loan impairment provision, for every customer. I wanted a load of details. The bank came back and said, with that information, it's going to take us 25 years or 30 years to get it. And I wanted that information, because I could not justify sanctioning the loan impairment provisions to be paid for by the taxpayer. Absolute nonsense. Anyway, this is the most important slide, I believe, out of the whole presentation. Ethics is something built into my core, and the core principles underpinning ethical behaviour are integrity, having high moral standards, fairness, dealing with people and issues in an even-handed way, without favouritism or preference for an outcome based on personal value or judgment. Well, I know no lawyer in this room would understand that. Objectivity refers to willingness of an individual to view a situation from an entirely unbiased standpoint. This important quality is particularly important in retail banking, where unjustified prejudices could result in customers being treated inconsistently. Probity refers to a willingness to consider an entire situation to arrive at the true picture. I would suggest that bankers and their agents, including judges and regulators, are guilty of having a lack of probity. Openness and transparency. It refers to an individual's preparedness to reveal or make available relevant or appropriate information. Transparency relates to not clouding an issue or concealing relevant details. Well, all you have to do is turn up at the Royal Courts of Justice, and you certainly don't get out of there, I can guarantee it. One thing about the Royal Courts of Justice is, at lunchtime, the defendants or complainant is often heard fairly, I suspect, but I have seen a complete change of attitude after lunch when the judge comes out of his chambers and then he delivers a highly derogatory judgment. I've seen that time and time again. Now, I suspect there are phone calls going between the Treasury, the judge, which doesn't allow any fairness or any probity to become forthcoming. Next thing is openness and transparency. It refers to an individual's preparedness to reveal or make available relevant or appropriate information. Transparency relates to not clouding an issue or concealing relevant details. Judgment. Well, the civil service know a lot about judgment, because one of the things they kept on going on at me about was my lack of judgment when I was challenging them, and I did that the whole time. They called me a maverick, and I was very proud of that title, I have to say, because it's quite funny. Upon my retirement due, one of the senior tax inspectors came up to me and said, "Nigel, when you first joined Revenue, we thought you were mad. Now we realise you were telling the truth, and everything you've said to us over the 9 years you've been here was totally correct." I took that as an acceptance of my being. Responsibility. People don't seem to have responsibility. They don't seem to take it. And when you think of the pay structures of the chairman and the boards, what are they being paid for? I really don't know. It begs belief. Responsibility is a duty, obligation, or burden. In a work context, it relates to what an individual has to do as part of a job. Taking responsibility refers to accepting and acting on obligations, which can be difficult when there is an unpleasant outcome. Now, I challenged Gutenberg. I won't call him by his first name because he doesn't deserve it. I challenged Gutenberg in the AGM, which I was with Trevor, And I spoke for about 20 minutes, giving him what I thought about him in the bank, because when I joined Lloyds Bank, it was a good bank. It actually had honest people, and you had to know your customers. We used to have a situation where a customer phoned up and said, "Can I have 20,000 quid?" You look at it and say, "Yes." You didn't go and have a chat. But nowadays it's so bad that, you know, I don't trust banks full stop. Accountability, Lord Carrington, you probably remember that guy or heard of him. He was a former minister in the Thatcher's government who resigned believing himself to be accountable for intelligence failings during the invasion of the Falkland Islands. If only there were more ministers today who understood their obligations. Ethics and professional relationships. Corporate governance is a system through which organisations are directed and controlled. Corporate governance is the responsibility of those who set policies for the organisation in pursuit of its goals. Ultimately, it's the duty of the directors of an organisation to ensure that there are appropriate systems in place. But I can quite happily confirm to you, NatWest, RBS, Lloyds, and all the other ones have no good corporate governance. It's rubbish. The public perception of reputational risk. Public interest may be defined as the people's general welfare and well-being. Now remember that, that's important, because they always say in the public interest, we do not want to publish what's going on, really. But actually it's something vital to society. This should be paramount to all those in control. A fiduciary is a person who is entrusted with assets belonging to others. Therefore, a fiduciary responsibility is a moral one arising from the trust placed in the individual. This applies to anybody connected with lending and loan underwriting, resulting in a bank taking security over a customer's assets to secure a loan. That is a very serious duty for us all. You know, when you're playing with people's lives, their families, their businesses, their homes, and you fuck up, it's bloody bad news, sorry. Please forgive my swearing. The duty of confidentiality to their customers is a wonderful case, remember it well. It's called Tournier versus National Provincial and Union Bank of 1924. And this has been the principles of this have been restated in the banking code. Question. Who fell foul of this established fiduciary responsibility which she ignored at great cost to NatWest Bank? Rose, the Thorny Rose. She fell foul of that and she was wrong, because confidentiality is quintessential to banking, full stop. To become a chartered banker, it is necessary to attain a minimum level of qualification and being time served and proven. It took me 20 years to become a chartered banker, and I'd actually lent money. I'd worked across the country. I worked in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Middlesbrough, Durham, Taunton, Torquay, all over the place, London, as an internal auditor. And this entails being accepted for membership of a recognised professional body or institute, such as a Chartered Institute of Bankers in Scotland or Ireland. And we have to stand and be counted. And where we find evil, and I call it evil, then we have to stand up like I am today and call it out. I've had 2 death threats. I'm not bothered about that. I've told the police, and they put a special police hotline into my home for me. But I have to say, if someone's stupid enough to want to kill me because I'm telling the truth, then it's their problem, not mine. I'm currently trying to get senior director of a bank, one of our banks that we know. I won't mention the name because it's too obvious as to who it is. But I've actually put a formal complaint to the Chartered Banker Institute in Scotland, where I was a former trustee, but I've just reapplied to become a trustee again. There's another problem there, because in 2016, Andrew Mitchell MP brought an enormous amount of pressure on my chief executive to ask me to stand down from council because I was really giving bankers a hard time. And this was about the time, this was after Fred the Shred, but it was also at a time when I was challenging council members, because some of the council members from Lloyds and RBS, unfortunately they're none on the board now, none on council, which is great. They were really trying to get me out, and they did. But I resigned. I stepped down. I agreed to step down for a very good reason, and that I didn't, which was I did not want to bring the institute into disrepute, and I hold my ground on that. I did the right thing because it could have been very embarrassing, especially with the MPs. But now I'm out. I'm retired. I want to keep the fight going. We have to keep the fight going, and I have great. I think it's core. It came from the church. I went to school in Belfast, and I was with a lovely family, and I am a Christian Scientist. And she taught me everything that there is about honesty, truth, fairness, justice, and everything else. And I will never prostitute my core beliefs. They can throw whatever they like at me, but when I know I'm right, I'm right. Oh, this is important coming up. How we mend banking and repair banking. Well, I've been talking this line now for 10 years at least, and this is vital. We have to close all so-called regulators at the moment. Get rid of the bloody lot of them. And install 2 new regulators. One, a controller for banking, whose sole purpose is to police the boardroom, the chairman, the board senior management, and all their activities, full stop. They hate this. They don't like anybody looking at their works and what they're doing. They really hate it. That's exactly why I'm recommending it. So we have a controller for banking, which incorporates a fraud special investigation department, which reviews absolutely everything the board are doing. For example, who they have lunch with, who they go to rugby matches with, who is buying their favour. And that is something that we would stamp out. The next thing is, and this is my favourite, the professional complaints regulator for all agents. Agents are the problem. The lawyers are the problem. The insolvency practitioners are the problem. The valuers are the problem. And of course, not forgetting the bankers. But we've covered that off by the controller for banking. But nobody's looked at agents. All their regulatory authorities and their institutes are impotent, and they fail to discipline people, and it's just nonsense. So what I'm recommending is a tightening up and a real, robust, ruthless regulator to control lawyers, accountants, valuers, and insolvency creditors. And that has to happen. Next slide, please. Complaints. Now, this is an area when I joined banking in Lloyds, and when I went on the internal audit team, the first thing we did when we got into a bank branch for an inspection was to check the cash. That was good, we did that. Next thing was for me to review the complaints register, because every bank should have a complaints register. I did that thoroughly. And from that, I was able to sack a couple of bank managers, because the complaints were not being handled properly. And as far as I'm concerned, if someone's got a complaint, you deal with it now and not tomorrow. That has to happen. And if we look now around the room, I know there are people in here who've been complaining for 20, 30 years. That is totally unacceptable. And really, the regulators will take that on board once I get a professional complaints regulator in place. This is a slide that you'll like. Sorry, next one. Yeah, here we are. Who's got the biggest fines? The financial services industry. £5.7 billion. That was up to since 2010. You know, really, you work that out. That's outrageous. One fine is one too many. £1 fine is one too many. And 5.7 billion? Come on. This is just not, this is just unfair.
Have that in petty cash.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's their beer money, isn't it? It's a sort of, it's an entertaining budget. Right, the next slide, please. All these, I won't go through them in detail, but all these people on the left are basically crooks. They fail to do their duties to us, the public. They hate us. They've proven that. I watched Davos on TV this morning. I was shocked at what they're proposing. Absolutely mortified. And we're sleepwalking into a nightmare. You want to watch this Davos programme. It's run by crooks, for crooks benefits, and I have to say it's totally outrageous. Now, I've always said that nothing good has come out of America, and I know I'm right. If you look at JP Morgan Chase, Rishi Sunak, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, not one of them can lie straight in bed at night, I'm bloody sure of it. Thank you. Yeah, this is the tragedy of it all, and it all stems from bad underwriting, bad lending. You know, when I had money, I went out to the factory, walked the factory, I went and met the families, because it's a partnership. It's a partnership built on trust, or should be built on trust. And I've actually had an interesting situation with a wonderful company, builders in Sheffield, called James and Smith. Very good friends of mine at the time. This is going back 20, 30 years. Anyway, they were being given a hard time by my head office, Advances Department. Anyway, stupidly, the bank decided to hold a business-to-business exhibition in one of the hotels in Sheffield. I was told not to invite James and Smith, so what did I do? Yes, I invited him. And it was wonderful, because the head of lending for the bank was there. Now, he was a bit of a prat, I really believed. He and I never saw eye to eye. He was a bully, he was a thug. And I have to say, it was wonderful to watch James and Smith spill blood over lunch. I really enjoyed that. Didn't do me any favours because I got reprimanded and talked to afterwards, but I was right. I was totally right. Why shouldn't customers be able to get to the top man? They should. You know, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a top man, you take the rough with the smooth. You know, you have to. And this is the problem. We have a chairman, executive, and board members of our countries and world's bankers who are in total denial. And it's bloody awful, excuse my French. It really annoys me, this. I get really upset. Anyway, next slide. Oh, Ireland. This is one of my things I love. When I was in HMRC, I said to them, I think we ought to work with NAMA. And they said, what do you mean? I said, have you read any of the NAMA reports into banking? They said, no. I said, well, you bloody ought to. So anyway, they sent me across to Ireland to meet, and we then went through the evidence of that NAMA had turned up. And that was exactly the same evidence we've had in London. And the evidence was this: there were no loan agreements, there were no contracts, there was no valuations, the security was corrupted and actually would fail in any inspection, and the whole thing was, you know, the banking structure was totally wrong. I see yesterday, was it, the NAMA figures, they had another 330 odd million repaid from the sale of assets that they'd recovered. Well, that's so sad, because it's only going to the Treasury, it's not going to the victims where it belongs. One thing that does concern me, and this is a real concern I have, in March this year, HMRC gave tax exemptions to securitisation companies from stamp duty land tax. If that's not a recipe for disaster, I don't know what is. Because we honest taxpayers are missing out on a golden pot, and that is the money that every securitisation company should be paying in stamp duty land tax for every securitised loan that they take on board. It's a travesty of justice. I've raised this with Prem Sikher in the House of Lords and various other places, and it's something that we have to really fight for to get it overturned. Because why should an offshore, unregulated entity get benefits that you and I can't get? It's a nonsense. I've raced through this, I'm afraid. I had lots of anecdotal stuff, but final slide. Yes, when I joined the bank in '71, I was told that if I wanted to get to a senior manager's role, I'd have to study. I've actually been studying up until the age of 67, when I got my master's degree. I then said to my dean at Bangor University, I said, "Dean, I want to do a PhD." He said, "Nigel, you'll be dead by the time you finish it." I still want to do a PhD, but if they'd shorten it, it'd be a lot easier. Because the work that goes into a PhD is phenomenal. I know I've got all the evidence, I've got all the stuff to write a PhD about banking, crime and terrorism of their customers. And don't forget to use the word terrorism. It's a true thing that's happening to you. You're being terrorised. Don't forget it. You know, I'm one of these guys that uses it all the time, because I've seen the damage inflicted on your families, and it grieves me to the bottom of my heart. I hate it, absolutely hate it. Anyway, that's me done, but I would like to say thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry we're here talking about this subject, but we will keep fighting for you, and I'll do my best.
Anybody have a question for Nigel?
Over here, Ben.
Nigel, thanks for arriving here today. We're very interested in your presentation, but it's something you're probably not aware of. After the crash in 2008, the Oireachtas had a banking inquiry in relation to banking in Ireland regarding the crash. I'm not 100% sure you know, but there's actually an article, I think it's book 2, that actually says in it that the sentence that they use is the sovereign is not to allow a bank fail. Now, I believe that to be coming from the Crown of England, really, regarding the banking situation. So I believe also that that's actually given sovereign, you could say sovereign immunity to bankers to do what they're doing. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the banks are created by royal charters, going back from the 1700s. And this report that was done was released after the Oireachtas in 2008. When they said that sentence, they said the sovereign is not allowed a bank fail. So I believe really that they're allowed to do anything they want. If you read the constitutions of the banks, if you read particularly one which is KBC, they actually say that they will actually defend any employee involved in criminality or civil matters. And I believe that is totally against any company, because they're not supposed to be involved in criminality in the first place. And it is a criminal matter. The shareholders should be protected, in the sense that it's the shareholders that are eventually going to be paying out for these fees. I'm just wondering if you could comment a bit on what I've actually said.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because it's very much a subject dear to my heart. As a minor shareholder of Lloyds Bank, I asked why my bloody money is being used to pay their fines. I actually, when I was in revenue, recommended that RBS be allowed to collapse, Lloyds Bank be allowed to collapse, because we would have been through this mess a long time ago. Because there were a lot of challenger banks in the wings, ready to pick up the good business. I think it is the biggest mistake that governments have made and sovereign countries have made by not tackling the root cause of corruption and fraud across the city. Now, if you look at the City of London Corporation, they are responsible for tax evasion on a national, international scale. It's wrong. You know, why we've got tax havens, it beggars belief. You know, it really does. We should not have tax havens for anybody. And when you look at the Baroness Moan, or Baroness Bra as I call her, I mean, she should be in Pentonville prison. I rue the day she goes there. I look forward to it very much.
Thanks, guys. Well, just to carry on there, interesting for me is this report that says the sovereign is and bank fail. So is there actually a process in the bankers, or you say the chartered group of bankers, for complaints of bankers to be held account? Because if the public have complaints about bankers and their conduct, and they can't get it from the financial services industry, they can't get it from the courts, they can't get it from the police, is there a way in the Banking Institute or the charter, or whatever way, to actually bring bankers to account on matters?
It's funny you should mention that, because I'm doing exactly that right now. As a former council trustee of the Chartered Banker Institute, I have raised a complaint against a very senior director of RBS, and I've asked for her to be disciplined. I've asked for her fellowship to be revoked, and as far as I'm concerned, I will pursue that to the end of my days. And this is what we have to do. Unfortunately, the problem we have is the banks fund the institutes, and that is a double-edged sword. I think the institutes should be funded centrally by central government and the taxpayer. I do not think that it's healthy for the institute to take money from banks at all, because it's bribery. And when you've got bribery floating around, you have exactly what's happened to me with Andrew Mitchell MP when he made me step down.
So they seem that there's probably fraternal order involved in banks here, like Freemasons,
Actually, that was one of my slides. Sorry, I forgot to mention Freemasonry. I was one once. I've been a lot of things in my life. I used to work for Rotary, and I love Rotary. Freemasonry I joined in the City of London when I was I was a senior executive in Commercial Union when I was setting up their banking operation for them. And I have to say, it was very interesting, because I went to these lunches they had at the Café Royal. There's lodges underneath. And I sat down there looking around the room thinking, what the hell am I doing here? And I did. Anyway, very shortly after that, I resigned, because I have to say, Freemasonry does not practice what it preaches. It is there for climbing the greasy ladder, and it is there for self-profiteering. So I have to say, in my opinion, I would ban Freemasonry. Why do we need secret societies? We've got the Cabinet Office for that, haven't we? Now, you know, if you look at those sitting around the Cabinet, the lies and things they keep on dreaming up to crucify us, beggars belief. And I think we need to have to rebalance every check and balance we've got in society at the moment, and for us, our voices to be heard, and for honesty, integrity, and truth, justice, and openness to return. We need that. We're crying out for it. And if we don't get it, I'm sure there'll be a revolution. and I'll lead it if necessary.
Go on, Nigel.
Okay, so we just have one more speaker just before we close up for lunch. Andy, you're going to join us.
Thank you very much.
Andy is going to show off now because he has one of these buttons that click the slides and I'm now redundant.
Thanks, Ben.
My name's Andy Agathangelou. My name is Andy Agathangelou, and I can't begin to tell you how proud I am to be here. I've been running events since 1987. Ladies and gentlemen, I genuinely suggest that before we do anything else, we put our hands together to show our appreciation to the people that made this possible, because this is a very, very important day. I run what is called in the UK a certified social enterprise. It's an organisation that has a purpose to it, a social purpose. It's an organisation I'm very proud to lead. It's an organisation I'm very proud to build from scratch since 2015. And it's an organisation I've decided to dedicate my working life to, and sometimes more than that. The official purpose of the Transparency Task Force is to promote reform of the financial sector so that it serves society better. And this is important, ladies and gentlemen, because if you study the history of the financial industry, it was never about ripping people off or cheating people. It was never about doing the egregious, nasty, conniving, cunning things that have been going on for the last 20 years or so. It was literally ordinary people finding ways to pool their money so that people could survive at times of chaos and calamity. That's where the financial services sector came from. It's not where we are now, is it? But with a bit of luck and a lot of effort, it might be the financial sector our kids and grandkids can benefit from in decades to come. That's only going to happen if we act in a particular way. And being blunt about it, we need to act in a way whereby we are willing to sacrifice our time and our effort and our money and our energy to make happen what must happen. January, and in particular, the beginning of January, is an important time for me, and I'm sure many of you. Because it's a good time to reflect on what happened in the year before, and it's a good time to think about our priorities for the year ahead. And I've got into a nice little routine. I found a nice process that I use to help me focus where I want to focus my energies in the year ahead. And believe it or not, that process revolves around the last verse of a particular song. And this song is so famous, you all know it. You've probably all sung it many a time. And just to test how familiar you are with it, I'm going to give you the words that begin the last verse. And the moment you think you recognise the song, please raise your hand. And it might well be you get it in less than 3 or 4 words. The first word is nothing. The second word is really. Thank you. Nothing really matters. Thank you. Lyrics by Freddie Mercury. You're probably now wondering, why is this guy on a stage in Dublin talking about Bohemian Rhapsody? And I'll tell you why.
And not singing.
And not singing. I will tell you why. The lines of that last verse are so powerful. I'll explain. The lyrics are, nothing really matters, anyone can see, nothing really matters, nothing really matters to me. We all know it. And I find those sentences, those words, my goodness me, the power of words, those words, so thought-provoking and so challenging. Because my response to those words when I hear them is to ask myself, is that true? Is there anything that matters to me? And that's what I ask myself as a matter of routine over the Christmas, New Year period, as a way for me to make a decision about what really matters to me. Where am I going to put my very, very limited resources to try to make a difference? And unfortunately, for reasons I'm going to explain, this year I didn't have to spend very long thinking about it because of something that happened last year. Something that's had such a profound effect on me. It's taken what was a pretty damn motivated person somewhere even beyond that. And I'm going to explain. And I'm going to show you precisely what I mean. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what's called an early day motion. Oh, excuse me. You can't see it. An early day motion, don't worry about that, that doesn't actually matter. An early day motion is something that the UK Parliament uses to record something. It's when the UK Parliament chooses to make a statement about something. And last March, April, I was involved in creating an early day motion for somebody we knew well, past tense, we knew well. Ian Davis, one of our volunteers, a really nice bloke. Ian lived in rural Scotland. He was a lawnmower repairman. He put his savings into an investment that turned out to be a complete fraud. A complete fraud. There was a catastrophic regulatory failure around that complete fraud. Long story short, Ian hanged himself. We knew him well. It wasn't nice, obviously. There are many people in this room who know people who have or have thought about that. But it wasn't actually the fact that he lost all his life savings just as he was about to retire that Ian hanged himself. We know this because of the records he left in Kent. He spoke in our events, he told his story. Ian hanged himself because after he lost his life savings, he basically went begging to Action Fraud and the Financial Conduct Authority and the Serious Fraud Office and the National Crime Agency. Please look at the evidence I'm gathering about this crime network that did what they did, that resulted in me and thousands of other people through the London Capital Finance scam to end up losing their life savings. It was a truly, truly tragic thing. And as a direct consequence of this, my organisation has decided that in 2024, we are going to be concentrating on doing everything we possibly can to mitigate the risk of people losing their lives, their well-being, their wealth as a consequence of catastrophic regulatory failure. I found this morning's talk so interesting. I know Trevor well, I know Nigel well. I've known Hester for a while. I've known Hester for a while. And there is most definitely a recurring theme that's coming through here. And the recurring theme is this. We can expect hard-nosed commercial organisations like banks to be completely focused on doing whatever they can to make money. That's what they do. That's their purpose, unfortunately. But they are supposed to be accountable to regulators. And those regulators have a responsibility. And that responsibility is to protect people and to ensure that when things go wrong, they're able to enforce and investigate. If the regulators did their job properly, we would be watching the football or the telly or with our kids or grandkids. Think about it. We can't possibly fix the system until we fix the performance of the regulators. And the problem is, and we all know this, we may describe it in different ways, but we all know that the regulators are riddled with conflicts of interest, aren't they? They are riddled with regulatory capture. There is this massive revolving door problem that results in regulators seriously underperforming. This must change. You can see behind me the speech from Matthew McGrath. Please do read the words. I'm sure you're familiar with it. During my talk today, I'm going to cover 3 key points, as best as I can, in the very limited time I've got available. The first point is about us all doing something that Hester touched on. You may have picked up when Hester said, being willing to take the risk to speak out. Didn't you, Hester? And that's what Matthew McGrath did. And Matthew McGrath would not have been able to write those words or speak them if it wasn't for Edmund Honohan. And Edmund Honohan would not have been able to do the thinking that led Matthew McGrath to write those words if it wasn't for Ben and Charlie making Edmund aware of it. So what we must start to see are the ripple effects, the flows of energy, Paddy, the flows of energy that happen when somebody somewhere does something, where they're willing to sacrifice and take on the risk that Hester touched on. when she spoke earlier. So, big message from me, number one, let's be brave enough to speak out. Let's stand up, not stand by. And in fact, let's not say it, let's shout it. Let's demand that the media in the UK, in Ireland, in the US, do their duty and report what's actually going on, not trying to sweep things under the carpet because the commercial side of the newspaper gets upset if somebody upsets the banks. We all know the game. This notion of being willing to speak up and speak out is most beautifully articulated here. You know what? I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent. It seems to me that something pretty cool was going on in the 60s and the 70s. Something really special. I wonder how different the world would be today if people like this gentleman hadn't been taken out. And for people like him. Robert F. Kennedy. Every time we turn our heads the other way, when we see the law flouted, when we tolerate what we know to be wrong, when we close our eyes and ears to the corrupt because we are too busy or too frightened, when we fail to speak up and speak out, we strike a blow against freedom and decency and justice. We must not give ourselves the option of staying quiet. We must speak out. Better still, we must shout. There have been several times since 2015 when I've had to make some pretty painful decisions about whether to speak out or not. And I can literally promise you, Robert F. Kennedy gave me the guidance of what I needed to do. The second point is precisely what is happening today. Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. The post office scandal has been mentioned several times. For those of you that have seen the programme, etc., you will know that on many occasions those poor innocent victims of abuse, egregious corporate terrorism were told, "You're the only one." It was when they started to learn how to fight together that they started to become powerful. And I sense and feel and bloody well hope that today's meeting is a milestone in the rate at which we are willing to work together, to share information. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, ladies and gentlemen. We're all trying to build a jigsaw puzzle landscape picture. We've all got some of the pieces, but none of us have got all of them. The Transparency Task Force is now made up of about 4,500 people in 20 countries. And what we're basically doing is saying, these are the jigsaw puzzle pieces I've got, where do you think they go? And it's helping us to understand the entire landscape, the relationships between the City of London Police, the Financial Conduct Authority, the Bank of England, the UK government, Ireland Central Bank, the whole lot. That's all about working together. And without a doubt, one of the most painful things to do, I know this, you know this too. I've had dozens and dozens of conversations with people who've been in tears, troubled, in pain, real pain. We have members who tell me that their children self-harm because they absorb the stress in the household. In May last year, somebody contacted the all-party parliamentary group we run. We run the all-party parliamentary group on personal banking and fair and financial services. When I say we run it, we provide the secretariat. Somebody contacted that EPPG. I'm not going to mention the gentleman's name. He basically contacted them. That resulted in me getting this phone call out of the blue. My name's... I'm going to be kidding myself, but I don't want to kind of waste my life. I've written a report all about a bank. Can you please help me get it out there? What do you do? We got lucky. We managed to talk this person into having a weekly meeting. It was my little cunning way of keep this person having something to look forward to and something to do. We did that throughout 2023. I did that because the feeling of Ian Davis, the gentleman who did kill himself, was too painful to want to experience again. January the 1st, this gentleman very seriously went on hunger strike, January the 1st this year. And we organised 6 meetings during the course of 1 week, and on Friday last week he came off it. And that's why we are going to continue to do all we can to focus on helping to protect the destruction of life and well-being and humanity and wealth as a direct consequence of the egregious, systemic, regulatory failure that has been going on in the UK and Ireland for decades. And my last comment, as you can see on the screen, is what I think about when things are getting really tough and you're saying to yourself, is this worth it? Am I going nuts here? Or shall we carry on? Again, another person from that part in history where things seem to have a sense of positivity and hope and potential and love and beauty and energy and humanity. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. What a sentence. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. My pitch to you, ladies and gentlemen, if I can put it in this way, is those 3 key points. Robert F. Kennedy's wisdom. Let's stand up and speak out. Better still, let's shout it. Margaret Mead's wisdom. Let's find ways of working together, sharing our knowledge and information. Groups of people can make a real difference. And Martin Luther King. If we can't walk to move forward, let's crawl. I, like probably every single one of you in this room, have made that mental decision to sacrifice whatever I need to sacrifice to achieve what I believe must be achieved. I'm going to finish with 3 sentences. The first is this. We must fight. The second is this. We must fight together. And the third, not for our generation, it's going to be too late for us, but for the sake of our kids and grandkids, we must fight together and we must win. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Okay, folks, first of all, thanks very much to Andy, and I'm going to tell him that the green tie he wears when he came to Ireland didn't go unnoticed. We have, unfortunately, Jim Sheridan couldn't make it. He's stuck in Portugal. He sends his regards. He sends a little video. I'll play it in a couple of minutes. But his brother and some camera crew and some audio people are here because he hopes to expose this corruption in a film that he intends to make. So I hope you all have your good sides today. So they're going to serve lunch now. After lunch, I will present the evidence of the fraud that everybody refers to, the Matthew McGrath, the Master of the High Court. I will be presenting an expose of that fraud. And then, just one other note before we have a bit of lunch. And by the way, we ran a little bit over time, so I may start as we're just having tea or coffee, don't think me rude. The last thing is, there was a lady who was assaulted, and her daughter also. Could she please find Trevor here standing up during the break? All right? Talk to you all soon, folks.